Why suburbia is the worst decision we ever made as a humanity. Oh my gosh, it's so bad. Even just the word suburbia just sends chills down your spine. It's so bad. Suburbs, bleh. So we're gonna take a very low level approach to this question. One PowerPoint straight through. We're not gonna run it back. We're not gonna self edit. We're just gonna go in one shot. Okay, so here we go. Why is suburbia the worst decision we ever made? Okay, so here we go. So you probably already feel like something about suburbia just doesn't seem great, right? Like you probably already had an intuition. And I'm telling you, yeah, your intuition is right. There's something very wrong about suburbia for humans, okay? And so I'm here to show you that your intuition was right, why it was right, and just how bad this shit really is, okay? So, first of all, let's define the term. What is suburbia? It comes from suburban, so we have spread out beyond the urban city, okay? And when we say suburbia, we're talking about an enormous use of land so that we can have a single family home, a single family detached home. That home was probably purchased from a loan from a giant bank, and on this home, this land that the home is on, we're gonna have a very nicely manicured lawn. There's nothing else on the lawn, and we're gonna have pretty much half the house square footage set aside for garage. And this image that I'm describing, it kind of has tidbits of what the forefathers hoped for us, but it has kind of been grossly taken beyond where it was supposed to go. So the reality is much uglier than what we actually need as people. So let's look at just how big it is, like how much space is actually taken up by suburbia. Here is a little area, a snippet of Evanston, Illinois, and I zoomed in on just any random part. I just took one rectangular section, and look at the whole thing is just suburbia. The whole thing is just filled in, and like you as you can see, I could have taken a snip from anywhere. All of it is just suburbia. Like look how much land is getting used for this. This is the scale. Really paints a good picture. And then, of course, if we look at this hilarious old image of a stock house plan, look at how much is garage, dude. I mean, come on. It's like basically 50% of the house. Anyway, so you see, this is giving you a great sense of scale. All right, so we now understand what suburbia is all about. So, okay, so let's talk about what we're going to go over today. We have got 5 chapters. The first chapter, whose idea was this anyway? And then our second chapter, human decision making, okay? Spoiler alert, it's really bad. Very bad. And then we're going to get to chapter 3, damage, that's to the environment. And chapter 4, damage to humans. And then at the end, we're going to have a special little chapter, why cities are actually better. Or are they? That's a question. So before we get started, I just want to say it sure would be predictable if I went in order, huh? Let's start with chapter 3. Okay, we're going to just start it with chapter 3. The damage that suburbia causes to the environment. Okay? Yeah, we're going out of order. All right. The landscape of the infinitely repeated form. That's a haunting phrase that's going to stick with you through this whole presentation. And when the presentation is over. That's what suburbia is. The landscape of the infinitely repeated form. Okay? The defining feature of suburbia is that it's spread out. There's a million ways that people have phrased this. We could say spread out. We could say low density. You've heard urban sprawl before. Okay, this is the key idea. This is what suburbia is all about: spreading out widely. Okay, so and if we think about what this means, suburbia. It's the most land-gobbling, expensive, resource-using, polluting way of life ever on Earth because of the way that it just multiplies and spreads itself out and requires a greater quantity of using all these things. Costs more to maintain, costs more to police, creates more pollution. Okay, more. So, it is truly fascinating, actually, just... if we call this a feat of human engineering, the whole thing it costs more money, it uses more resources, and again, like, we're just multiplying up the scale of resource usage, and it's terrible, it's awful, and like I just want to make sure that the understanding of scale is really clicking with you. It's about resource per person, okay? That's what we're thinking about. These images here on the left here amazingly paint a picture of how much space a person takes up when they use one method, and how much space they use up if they use a different method, right? The car method versus if everyone was on a bus. It's so clear how much space one person takes up. So when a single family of a couple people has an entire house, an entire plot of land, it's the same as this little car image, right? We are spending more money per person on construction, square footage, water pipes, electrical pipes, road signs, landscaping, okay, right? Per person. It's extrapolating up and up and up and up. So we get this scale issue, okay? So when we're understanding suburbia versus what it looks like in a high density place like the city, it really kind of boils down to the resource usage. It's a little bit tighter. You might be thinking, oh, wait a minute, aren't cities also totally dirty and polluting a lot and full of gross usage by the people of resources? Yes, but that's true, but we're still looking at the scale difference here. When you say that a person lives in a city, they have the option to do the greener modes of commute. They can take a bus, they can take a bike, they can still drive a car, but at least they have the option to do a LEED building, or a green operations within the building, right? The optionality is there in the city. It's not necessarily, I don't want to say that these are opposites. I don't want to say that necessarily cities are clean and suburbs aren't, but we at least are moving in the right direction by giving people who live in the denser place, the city, the optionality to create greener ways of life, okay? So let's take a look now at what is probably the biggest killer, the car. We're going to talk about the car a lot more throughout this PowerPoint. You're going to see it come up again and again. But, I mean, there's sort of just like this one through line through all of the damage that suburbia causes, and they all point back to the car. It's just everything in suburbia is dispersed. The only way for you to get around is with a car. So more driving, more long distances, more time spent driving, right? So when everything's getting more and more extrapolated, there's always, this car is always present in the expansion that has happened, this dispersed expansion that's going on. So let's wrap up this chapter here, and we're just going to remember that when it comes to the landscape of the infinitely repeated form, all this extra traveling that's going to have to happen for you to get these long sprawled out distances, it means that time deficit is built into this urban form, okay? Ooh, I mean, like, doesn't that just sit heavy with you? That's what's going on, okay? This is huge. So now that we have gotten through chapter 3, let's move on to the next chapter. Okay, so chapter 2 here. Okay, so why on earth would we choose something like that, right? Like, how could we have ever created something that was so wasteful? Are we dumb, right? Well, it turns out that the human brain is absolutely awful at making decisions that will bring us happiness for everything. Little things like, what should I eat for breakfast this morning, right? To bigger things like, where should I live, okay? Oh my gosh, the brain is so consistently bad. It's so bad, and it's so widely studied, that psychologists can actually look at you, look at your environment, and predict what wrong decision you'll make instead of the one that would be good for you. It's amazing. So the human brain is very bad at this. And let's apply it to our suburb scenario. Imagine this situation, okay? This is a very common situation. There's this wealthy residential realtor. They walk into an absolutely gorgeous mansion home, and what do they see? The current homeowners there never use the pool, never touch that game room. They basically have a whole house full of unhappiness. And it's like, didn't you realize that the home was so big that it was going to introduce a whole new level of housekeeping, right? And it's expensive to pay for all that housekeeping or pay for a maid, pay for maintenance, right? You've created a situation where you now have forced yourself to have to work harder to earn more money to upkeep this house. Like, why wasn't it more obvious to you, the home buyer, that you were creating this situation? Why were we so bad at seeing that beforehand? And this decision-making flaw in humans, like I was saying, it's very widely studied. I mean, this is like, it's so commonly understood that we are awful at decision-making. Even experts at decision-making are still prone to basic errors from illusions and stuff. But in order to explain it from a brain point of view, we're just going to understand that when we are trying to decide what would make us happy, we go into the comparison mode, which is wrong. We should go into data mode. We should go into, oh, well, what's the value of the thing? Would that make me happy, right? But no, we go into comparison mode. We look around at all the stuff that's around us, stuff that other people have, stuff that we could buy, right? And we decide, could those things bring me more happiness than my current happiness now? And it's just, it's hard because there are so many things in front of our face. And when you're looking at all these different things and constantly saying, would that make me happier? Would this bring more value to my life? New people, new sites, new things to buy. It's a constantly moving finish line. And not only are there all these finish lines moving and sliding all over the place, but our brain is also not so great at estimating the distance to a finish line. So what I'm trying to say is that it's a constantly moving target. That's why it's so impossible to find happiness and why it feels so difficult for us to narrow down on it. I mean, we're quite literally creating a wild goose chase for ourselves. All these finish lines are moving, but our situation never even changed. It's truly a mess. It's truly confusing. It's quite literally the carrot on the stick. And we humans are awful at this. So we're always making these haphazard comparisons to other things, and we think that we think that there's one direct route to happiness. Absolutely not. So let's keep going here. Let's understand the psychology of need. The psychology that we decide what would be best for us based on a comparison. We developed that evolutionarily, and it would have been very useful to our prehistoric selves. Hunting, gathering. Oh no, am I dissatisfied now? I must work harder, and I must look harder for more prey or berries to collect, better resources, right? The problem is modernity has changed a lot, and our brains have changed very little, and this mindset is absolutely useless to us in modernity. It's this way of thinking is ingrained in our brain. It's like literally genetic, and here we are thinking that marble countertops and stainless steel appliances will increase our chance of survival. So it's very backwards, and this is what we're struggling with. This is what we're up against. So, of course, you all know that the true definition of happiness comes from a process of doing, right? Not owning some nicer appliance or some object that will bring you happiness. That's not how happiness works. It comes from a process of doing something. It's not even about reaching a destination ever. It's just about the process. Intrinsic human happiness is about the journey, right? Not the destination. This is why raising a child, starting your own business, painting that big painting, right? These activities, these long-term life processes, they all feel way more fulfilling than buying a new granite countertop or getting a raise at work. All of those things are fleeting, right? So this is what we're going to think about when we're understanding happiness. It's about what's long-term. And by the way, it's the same with the social realm. When you're with your friends, the more that you spend time with them, the more that you see them, the more intimate those friendships grow, and the deeper they become over time. You feel like you are in control and like you've chosen to spend time with them. You build a resilient, continuous kind of friendship and happiness that lasts as long as you keep doing it. So that's why, that's why we want to understand happiness as this long-term process. But God damn it, why can't we in our brains naturally distinguish between that ephemeral, everlasting happiness and these immediate happinesses, right? Why is our brain so twisted backwards that we struggle with this? And that, I mean, that's a whole nother PowerPoint where, we could talk for hours about that struggle. But in terms of us choosing suburbia continually again and again, it just goes to show you that we haven't got this locked in. It's bad. And it's fine if you make a wrong decision that doesn't bring you happiness tomorrow, but it's not so fine when a person buys a home in a city that they don't really love, or at a price range that was more than they could afford, or in a place where they don't know anyone. This is how millions of people choose their homes, and then they're stuck with this decision for decades or more. So it's really bad. And then, of course, the last thing we're going to say in this chapter here is when we're trying to determine what would make us happy, we're fighting that one uphill battle of the brain, but we're also fighting another uphill battle of what culture is showing us. Culture is also deeply ingrained in our brains. And look, here in the 80s, we had all these TV shows about families who lived in suburban homes. But look what happened as we switched into the 90s. We started to get new media and new TV shows that were showing the young couples living in high rises designed by star architects and doing the city urban thing, right? When you watch these things when you're young, they set your expectations for the kind of life that you want to live. They set sort of like your understanding of what a high status neighborhood would be, and it's sort of, ooh, look at this hip place for the upwardly mobile. That's what I want to do when I turn that age, right? You're being given a mental library of expectations that shape what your aspirations are. And then, like, if we're talking about suburbs, we're talking about what is your taste for a domestic life, right? Totally different images here. And last but not least, is the final nail in the coffin here. If you don't think that giving a little girl the Barbie dream house when she's a little kid, if you don't think that that's going to prime her expectations for what kind of house she wants to live in throughout her life as she grows up, oh my God. Certainly, we are creating unrealistic expectations for these girls as they grow up, right? And, Barbie is just a fantastic example. So, truly, there's kind of like some brainwashing going on. It's not great. So you understand what we're up against here, okay? So let's move on to chapter 4 now, okay? Chapter 4, let's talk about the damage that suburbia does to us as humans, okay? So suburbia does not make you happy. It does not make you happy. It literally makes you unhappy. Even if you paid half the price for your you paid half the price for your house than your neighbor, even if you had all the newest technology, all the nicest appliances in your house, heaters, lights, blah, 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 private gardens, all these things, that wouldn't make you happy, because living in suburbia fundamentally reorders the way you spend your time. Remember we were talking about time? Remember we were talking about needing the car? Okay? Living in suburbia fundamentally changes how you experience time and with which members of your family, okay? That's why you can't find happiness in this environment. So, say we're living in suburbia and we want to see our friends, okay? You want to see your friend. To go see one another, or to go to your job or to go to school, you have to have a car. You have to drive several hours of your life. You have to drive past other cities, other parts of the municipality, other stores. And the more time that you spend driving, the less time that you're going to spend doing the social activity that you're going to get to, right? Also including whatever recreational stuff you want to do, sports or whatever you're trying to do in your free time. It's getting eaten up by the driving. So imagine this situation, okay? So you've got your friend, you live in suburbia, your friend lives in suburbia, and you want to meet up. The amount of friction that it's going to require for you two to hang out is way more than inconvenient. You both have got to choose a time and a destination that works for both of your off hours. If the place or the time falls outside of that window, then you're both going to be like, you know what, it's just not convenient, and then you're just not going to do it. So we're adding so much difficulty for you to just try to maintain connections with your friends, okay? So let's take this a step further. Let's look at the suburban mom, okay? Look at the obligations of the suburban adult. It's just this marathon of commuting between distant appointments, all errands, shopping trips, okay? The kids are robbed of those crucial hours spent with their parents because their parents' lives are so stretched out. Once again, time deficit is built into the urban form, okay? It's really bad. So let's we're really driving the nail into the hole here. Isolation it's the greatest environmental hazard to living. It's the worst killer of humans. Isolation is worse than noise, it's worse than air pollution, it's definitely worse than overcrowding. And if the studies actually show that if a person is isolated, they're more likely to suffer with stuff like colds and heart attacks, and of course depression. Whereas people who are connected and have lots of people around them in their lives report that they sleep better. They report that they are happier in their lives. They live longer, right? So it's amazing. It's amazing. We're getting into science and biology here. So I want to give you an example, or I should say a metaphor. A person's social life is kind of like the roots of a tree. You've got all these core relationships in the trunk, and as you go into the roots spread out in various sizes, various distances, various overlapping of one another. The social network, the social tree root system of someone who lives in suburbia only has a couple roots that are tightly constrained and wrapping all back over each other of the same parents, spouses, and kids, as opposed to someone who doesn't live in suburbia, who has all of these clubs that they're a part of, all these organizations, multiple different varying roots of different lengths, right? So we want to avoid the stunted growth where there's only a couple roots and they're all constricting over each other. I would call that withering social capital. That's a great little phrase that we can think about. The withering away of social capital. And of course, if you're in suburbia, this is the environment where you multiply the withering of the social capital. It's an environment where people become more solitary. And then what happens when they become solitary? The inertia kicks in. They go out less. It feels even harder to go out because they go out less. And then because of that, they go out even less. And then before you know it, they haven't gone out in so long. It's just like they even forgot how to do anything like that. So this is what isolation looks like. This is what isolation is. By 2004, less than 30% of families ate dinner together every night. That's not great. And then, of course, divorces are increasing. People are less likely to participate in volunteer stuff, less likely to join in on politics, movements, that kind of thing. So this is the isolation increasing. And as we wrap up this little chapter here, our creation of suburbs was sort of a reaction to what we were living in before. When we created suburbs, we were trying to move away from the urban core, right? The urban core was a place where there were smoggy air, dirty horses, overcrowding, bustling streets, right? And we wanted to solve this problem. And luckily, we did it. We did solve that problem. We created all this technology to solve those problems. But we went very far in the other direction, the polar opposite direction, We widened roads. We purified our air and water. We drove down rates of infectious diseases, right? Congratulations, us. The negative effects of the Industrial Revolution have been solved. Yay! But our creation of the suburbs brings about a new kind of damage, this silent toxin of isolation. And I mean, that's very much a sickness in its own right. So let's move on here to chapter 1. Whose horrible idea was this anyway? Okay, seems like a pretty big goof up for us humans, right? That we would create this awful time suck isolative environment. But the truth is, it's not a goof up. It was willed. We very intentionally created suburbs. This was not accidental at all. So how did this all start? Well, let's have a little history lesson here. Let's remember what was going on in America at the time. This is like the 30s into the 40s. We have this Great Depression. We have the Second World War. You remember how traumatic the first one was? Oh my God. Like, I mean, this is craziness. This is what's going on in America. And we're trying to heal. We're trying to put this behind us and create a brighter America after all these horrible things that are going on. But how are we going to stand back up after this cripple, right? What can we do where we can just generate a shit ton of money? That way we can rebuild America. What would be an insane economic engine? They're thinking, and they're like, well, it's 1945. This is something that America's never really had before. What if we had a nationally organized, one consolidated mortgage marketplace? There sure are a lot of veterans who have nothing going on anymore, and just before the war started, we had Franklin Roosevelt created the FHA for housing during the Depression years. America was like, you know what? I have an idea. Let's combine these ideas and let's create one nationally organized, consolidated mortgage market for the whole country. This is interesting. And they were like, but sir, if we were to do that, wouldn't that require a huge amount of propaganda efforts to convince all Americans that they need to become homeowners? Yes, that's exactly what we're going to do. And that's what we did. So I don't want you to look at this and be like, evil. I don't want you to say evil just yet. A national mortgage marketplace has obvious advantages. If we bring all the demand for money close to the supply for the money, if we bring those things together closely, quickly, and sensitively, that could be amazing. But the problem was we chose this method and diverted it into one kind of growth, one type of house, and we repeated that infinitely. That has horrible disadvantages. So we definitely were intentional when we created this consolidated national mortgage market, but it was specifically calculated to encourage suburban growth, suburban homes, and that's the issue. So we've got this. The city is where everything was concentrated, and then we just started to sprawl out from there, endlessly sprawling, just out, just duplicate it as much as we want. And I got to tell you, this decision by the national, by Congress and by these national organizations really made suburbia feel practical and feel easy. That was what the propaganda was doing. So we had the FHA, which was, like I said, it was a housing program during the Depression to try to get more people to feel okay signing on to a mortgage. They basically expanded the FHA and they took it to another level, and they said, we're going to subsidize construction home builders so that there can be more houses. And they were like, go, build more houses. And it's kind of a great idea, right? Not only did they get more construction workers to start building houses, but this encourages there to be more house stock, more people to go get a mortgage and to become homeowners. Got the gears turning, right? Way more people started to get mortgages once the snowball started to get going. And then, of course, I mentioned the veterans aspect. One part of this FHA expansion was the release of the GI Bill. And the GI Bill it essentially guaranteed home loans for veterans. And so the veterans would be able to make a down payment of $1 and they would become homeowners based on that start. And I mean, I just like, you got to understand how transformative that is for the country. All of these men are seeing the ads and they're seeing the propaganda and they're like, sounds good. This is my future. And how exciting, right? To own your own home, to own your own land. So culture is significantly transforming. America's landscape is significantly transforming. And the lives of all of these Americans are significantly transforming. I need you to see what's really going on. You know, the government was devising very carefully this strategy to incentivize as many Americans as they could to get in on this, to start buying mortgages, to start owning homes. I mean, what a great economic engine that they chose. Homes, houses. You know how much value can be held in a home given all the construction workers and trades that are required to put it together? A house is a very big engine, right? So multiplication of this and suburban sprawl, that's what happened. It was very much planned. It was very much instituted. It very much took many decades, but all of America's culture was changed towards this, was changed towards being in favor of this. And then year by year, Americans, they're not paying attention to the big picture. They lost the forest for the trees. We lost the forest for the trees. We as a country, we asked for this, and then we got it. And now we're at a point where we just accept suburban life as if God ordained it, okay? So we're going to get to the end of our little presentation here, and we're going to say, well, let's compare suburbia to the city, okay? Why would a city be better? And the first thing I'm going to say is they're not better. I think that cities are full of problems too. They are an improvement over suburbia. But this is actually what peak human living looks like, what domestic life looks like. If we slow down, if we go way smaller, we keep a tight knit of close family members that we have space to get away from, but also are only the essential connections that we need. We keep the scale relative to the human, and living in a small rural village in something like this, I mean, that's really how most of humans live for most of their life, and it's all we really need. So let's now that that's out of the way, let's actually talk about the city, which is a little bit more realistic to find yourself in compared to giving it all away and going off the grid and living in Transylvania. Why would a city be a better choice? I'm going to say three things here. Number one, movement is slower. The optionality of the commuter, kind of touched on that earlier, and this idea called the sidewalk ballet. This is what Jane Jacobs talks about. So movement is slower. What do I mean? I mean that you get on foot and it takes longer for you to get from point A to point B because you're on foot. When we look at a city, we're looking at the city and we're judging it based on its appearance. But we should really be judging it based on its velocity. How quickly do we move through it? When you're in a car, you zoom past things. You zoom past parts of the city, buildings, like little cities within cities. You zoom past and you don't take them in. But when you're on foot, you take in smells, you take in sights, you have the ability to pause if you want. And the movement is just, it's a little bit more slower that way. And then, of course, if more people are pedestrian, then that shapes what will get built into the city, right? So it's a feedback loop. So we're talking about commuting, we're talking about moving, we're talking about the optionality of how you want to commute. As we know, in cities, you have the options. Take a bus, take a car, take a bike. Take a bus, walk, or take a bike. But when you're in the suburbs, car is your only option, okay? So I just want to remind you about the psychology of this. Driving in traffic is an absolute stress stew of hormones. Stopping and going, random honking, idiots trying to get into your lane, missing the light, keeping your eye out for pedestrians, right? Like, all these things are a flurry of little micro doses of that emergency response activation in your brain. And it's fine and useful, actually, those little receptors in your brain, in small doses. But if you activate them for prolonged periods, like 40 minutes to an hour, that's gonna make you ill. And of course, if you're doing this your whole life, that's really gonna compromise your immune system. And I mean, like, literally brain cells will start dying. Your blood vessels will shrink. Your bones will weaken. This is what long-term stress does to your body. And then I'm not even going to touch on people who have road rage too, where now you're experiencing the chronic stress and the chronic anger, even worse. Okay, so in summary, you've got good stress and you've got bad stress. The way that I've heard it put, which is hilarious, is good stress is a roller coaster that lasts 3 minutes. Bad stress is a roller coaster that lasts 3 days. Okay, so you've got this stressful traffic commute. It can take you like an hour or something at the end of a commute to just calm down and be able to concentrate on something again after the stress that your body just went through. And yet, despite all this, despite what we know, here we are, tons of people in traffic every morning on their morning commute, and commute times just getting longer and longer in this country. So, not good. Let's talk about what's the alternative there. You live in the city, you can opt for being a biker. You've got this self-propelled method of commuting. And guess what? People who report walking to work, running to work, or biking to work, they report being happier. They report being happier with their jobs and with their commute. And they also feel like the commute is easier. How subjective is that? So, and I know what you're thinking, right? Like, how on earth could riding a bike, which requires me to use more energy and more effort, how could that possibly be more satisfying than driving? And the answer just goes back to that basic psychology. Our bodies evolved so that we could move, so that we would use them. We've been walking for how many millions of years of our lives? If we're just merely being transported by something, that doesn't feel as good as movement. I'm very serious about this. Our genetic framework built us so that we could travel across big landscapes on two legs. For 4 million years we've been doing this. And I mean, like, not just traveling, but all the berry picking and all the animal hunting, like carrying heavy stuff. Like, this is what we've done for years and years. This is what survival looked like. This is what the human experience looked like. So every day, hours and hours, spending energy on 2 feet. Compare that to sitting in an office for 40 hours a week, right? Like, not good. So being sedentary, being in a car, it's the equivalent to you getting rusty, your body getting rusty. Over your lifespan of doing that, you will lose mobility, your muscles will start to atrophy, your bones get weaker, your blood vessels get more clotted. It's bad. A sedentary lifestyle will hasten your death. It will shorten your overall lifespan. So when we talk about why is walking so important, the psychologists have said that one of the best ways to increase happiness right away and to improve your mood is just to go for a brisk walk. It's that simple. And that's how innately our bodies enjoy walking. It just feels so natural to the body to walk. And that's why you can actually feel your mood improve, even just from those first few steps when you start to take a walk. And that's also why you've probably experienced it's really easy to clear your mind by going for a walk. There's one psychologist who says there's no thought so burdensome that you can't literally walk away from it. So walking clears your mind. Riding a bike clears your mind. It has a similar effect. The only benefit of riding a bike, in addition to walking, is that you get where you're going faster. So this is incredible. This is something that we really need to be thinking about. This is providing happiness and long-term health to our lives. And of course, I know what you're thinking. Okay, you've convinced me. I'll just move to a city and I'll become a biker. But it's not that simple either, because we've got all these Americans who live in the suburbs and they say, I'd love to live in a walkable community with lots of shops and activities and have a short commute. But these places are just in short supply. Suburbia is what's in large supply. So this is really hard, okay? Americans having the option for all of them to have a 5-minute walk to the nearest bus stop. Bro, we can't supply that. We are not ready for that. So, trying to supply suburban dudes, suburban kids, suburban families with reliable public transit, that is beyond imagination. We are not anywhere near that. So it's ugly. Okay, and then let's talk about this last sort of idea about why living in the city is great. It's the street ballet, or the sidewalk ballet, is a concept where you can think about how does the city street work? You've got this city street with all these strangers on it, and what's actually happening is these strangers are coming together in quite intimate little moments, and in most cases they don't know each other, they don't want anything, they don't have a need to interact, but whenever they do need to interact, a tiny little nugget of trust is created into the street. It's built into the street. And I'm talking about like asking someone for directions, buying a newspaper from the newspaper guy, stopping by the local tavern and saying hey to everybody, hearing about a job listing from someone at the cash register, even handing the beggar $1, like all these like little moments. Each one of them is kind of trivial in and of itself, but the sum of all of those moments creates to building trust on a street. That is something that we cannot even fathom in a suburb setting. So this is what Jane Jacobs talks about. All these little sidewalk ballet, little dances. It's organic. It's made up of a bunch of little parts, and even if the little individual parts seem trivial, the sum of them is not. So let's think about a landscape, a place where you live, and thinking about the ballet. You've got just constant engagers in the landscape. All these little sights and smells, every facade of the architecture, one building after another is different, it's varied. You're walking down the street and you smell the fudge coming from that bakery, and you smell the trash coming from that alley, and there's all these like little activators of your senses, and what it's doing is it's creating your sense of stability in that place. You can lock in your familiarity in the place because your body is so engaged with it. And if you've got all of these little triggers, you start to feel like you can take identity with that place. Like, I really live there. This is the place where I live. And of course, if all of those triggers are graffiti and crime and abandoned buildings, well, that would create a place of, I don't want to live here. I don't want to identify myself with this place, right? So we just need to understand that a landscape has all of these little activators, and whether they're good or bad, that is what is defining our sense of connection to that place, by being amongst those little activators. So if we've got, just to explain this a little bit further, if we've got a city street that's full of mom and pop shops, bric-a-brac establishments here and there, conviviality on the sidewalk, right? Different colors, different size doors, different size windows, all these interesting window displays and stuff like that. All that stuff makes the city street very fun to walk on and to be a part of, and to say, I'll definitely come back here, right? If we're comparing that to the opposite, a strict orderly grid of the same size door, the same size window, sharp facades, gray colors. The human being's tendency is to quickly walk past that place. They don't want to stay. They wouldn't casually pick up a phone call in a place like that. They would want to get out of there. So we're through talking about the characteristics of the city and why they're a little bit healthier compared to the suburbs. And to conclude, I don't want to say that cities are the perfect solution. They definitely are not. They definitely are complex as well and full of issues that need solving, and are full of noises, pollution, litter, like all sorts of things that are not healthy for us. But we'll have another PowerPoint another day on how we can repair the erosion from a city. And here's a little hint: the car is the culprit of that one. The cars are what cause city erosion. But just with that being said, with that being understood, that cities are not perfect either, but they're a little bit healthier in comparison to the awful scale of suburbia. We can expand our knowledge, and we can re-enter the world with some better knowledge about what choices are not healthy for us. Okay, so that's the end of our PowerPoint here. Thanks everybody for catching this. And just remember, ample parking is the hallmark of suburbia.